So, guys, I'm here today to make a confession. I'm here to make a confession about something I've struggled the majority of my life. And I never quite knew how to reveal this part of myself because it's something a lot of people have struggled with, honestly. And it's something that I've always been, ashamed of. It's something that, obviously, you guys can see the title of a video. But it's something that I've been ashamed of, and I'm ashamed no more because shame only exists in the shadows, only in the shadows. But when you bring it up to the light, it stops having power over you. So I'm here to talk about my struggle with social anxiety. I've struggled with social anxiety the majority of my life. Crippling social anxiety. I'm not talking about the public speaking fear. I'm talking about not being able to make eye contact with anybody. I'm talking about not being able to ask a question that literally will determine if you pass or fail a class for fear of judgment. I am talking about looking at the floor every time you're walking because you're afraid of judgment. You're afraid of looking at anybody because you're afraid of them noticing you. So to set the stage, guys, before I go into how I started as an extremely socially anxious person to somebody who over their career now has well over 100,000 cold calls. I want to give you a little bit of background before I reveal how I made this transformation. Right, and I'll go quickly through it. I'll give more details in another video. But to set the stage, I was born here in the States, but English was not my first language because we moved for a couple years to my home country of Mexico. We came back, and at that point, I had only learned to read and write and speak Spanish. So when we came back, it was a language shock, it was a culture shock, and I was already at a disadvantage, right? I didn't even know how to raise my hand and ask to go to the restroom. I didn't know, right? And those are my earliest memories, right? Not fitting in, being teased, being made fun of because I, sound different from the other kids because, again, I have an accent. And yeah, I that set the stage for my social anxiety. And it just grew from there, right? So through elementary, through middle school, through high school, it impacted every single part of my life. I had very few friends. I was never able to get a girlfriend during school, and I just never participated in any kind of after school events, anything like that. I didn't get to have a prom. I was just way too nervous and anxious for me to do anything like that. So yeah, that was essentially my life. Like, I just kept to myself. And that's how I lived. I lived in the shadows, right? There would be days where I would just hide in the bathroom. There would be days where I would go at the worst time in my life. I'd go into the bathroom 15, 20 times a day at school because I would be constantly afraid to socialize. I would be afraid there's something on me. Like I have a piece of anything on my face. I have wrinkles on my clothes. And I always felt like I had to be on, right? I had to be on for everybody. I had to look perfect because I didn't want to be judged. I didn't want to be called out. I didn't want to be embarrassed. So that was my life. That was my life growing up. That was my life in school, right? So naturally, when I graduated, I really didn't have a plan. What I wanted to be always was a professional soccer player, but I was always far too obviously anxious to do that, right? Like, thinking of performing in front of thousands of people just made my stomach churn. So eventually, it's a story for another day, but for those reasons and others, I had to give that up, right? So I graduated high school somehow miraculously, right? Funny enough, I took AP classes in high school because they weren't really that hard. They weren't. It didn't require me to socialize a whole lot, so I was able to do that. So I graduated, pretty good GPA, but I didn't have a plan for myself, right? I was just quote unquote surviving high school, right? So I came out of high school without a plan, and I decided I'll just go to community college. And it turns out I didn't have any skills, right? I didn't know how to raise my hand, ask for questions. So, the professor would just go through the notes, and even though I would have a question, I wouldn't say anything. So you can imagine how that went. I quickly flunked out, right? Was out of all the money I invested. I flunked out. And at that point, I was like 20, 21, and I was out of crossroads, right? Because I was a point in my life where I'd failed at pretty much everything, right? I had virtually no friends. I had to give up my childhood dream, and I had failed what my parents really wanted me to do, which was get a degree, right? I'd failed the education route. So I had pretty much disappointed everybody in my life, no more than myself, right? I was disappointed in myself. I looked down on myself. I had no confidence, no sort of self-esteem. And I was just lost until I found something in my life, which was sales. And going into it, guys, I'm not going to pretend it was love at first sight. When I got into sales, it was just something for me to leave what I was currently doing because I was barely making minimum wage, and I just needed to make more money. And sales was always something that was like extremely lucrative, but it was something that obviously I never considered because, again, I dealt with major social anxiety. But at that point, I didn't have a lot of options, so I told myself, what the heck, I'll give it a try. At worst, I can always go back to what I was doing. So I gave it a try, guys, and years later, I am at a point where I have crossed well over 100,000 cold calls over my career, and I have managed multiple businesses. I have been, the CEO of a business, right? It was a small business, right? But I was a CEO / executive director all the same. I have my own marketing agency, right? I work for an enterprise currently where I make cold calls for a living. So I'm essentially a professional cold caller. Like that is what I do. So I want to talk about how I did this now that I've kind of set the stage. Essentially what I did to make this transformation, what I did was I removed optionality from the equation. You see, guys, with everything in life, we think we have options, but if you really examine, we don't. Give an example. Tomorrow, whatever, you probably have to go into work, right? And going in there, you don't want to go to work, but yet you show up to work because you removed the option not to go to work for whatever reason, right? You got bills to pay, you got your kids to feed, you got to put food on the table. For whatever reason, you have given yourself the ultimatum that you have no other option but to go to work. And that is essentially, I guess by accident, is what I did, right? At that point, I was at crossroads. I had failed at everything in my life. I was a failure. I had no confidence. I had no self-esteem. I had nothing in my life going for me. And at some point, I told myself, I'm going to get good at this no matter what. Failing is not an option. Quitting is not an option. Once I removed any other options from the equation, that's when the shift started. That's when I got really good at this thing, to the point where now I can pick up any random person and I can strike up a conversation. And while we don't know each other, while this person 30 seconds ago had no recollection, had no idea I existed, I can get a high-ranking executive to take a meeting with me to discuss potentially working with them, right? Which is insane. Not something I thought I'd be able to do in a million years. And while I'm really proud of myself, I know I still have a long way to go, because being transparent with you guys, the social anxiety is still there, right? Whenever I pick up the phone, sometimes I still feel that nervousness. I still feel that anxiety. But the thing is, it's not even only about removing optionality anymore from me at this stage. It's that I have enough evidence now. I've stacked enough evidence to show that while I have social anxiety, while I have clammy hands, it doesn't matter. I can still have success. I've still closed meetings. I've still set up meetings from some of the biggest executives out in my industry. I've still talked to high-ranking officials. I was still able to do what I needed to do despite the way I felt inside. And now that I have enough evidence, I know that I'm going to be okay. And that's what I want you guys, that's what I implore, that's what I suggest you guys do. You guys right now just don't have enough evidence to believe that you can be good at whatever you're thinking about being good at, right? Whether it's sales, whether it's trading Pokemon cards, whether it's boxing, whatever. You just don't have enough evidence. So you guys need to get out there and just start. And when I mean just start, literally just start. Don't wait for the perfect conditions. Those don't exist. Literally just start. And when you start, guys, remove optionality from the equation. There is no other alternative. When you go into that mindset, I promise you, you guys are gonna get good. You guys might not ever become the best, but you guys are gonna get good. Why? Because you removed optionality from the equation. You have no other choice. And that, to me, that's what I credit to my success. That is what I credit with the success I have today, where I still have social anxiety. I still get nervous. I'm still afraid of rejection, guys. I've probably been rejected well over 30,000 times in my career, probably more. But over time, I've become almost immunized for it. It's been not just the reps, but an understanding that I don't have an option, that this is going to work out, that I am not allowed to quit, that it's either I do this or I die trying to do this. And that, guys, again, is what I credit to my success today, and what I'm going to keep on crediting to my continued success now that I'm pursuing entrepreneurship, now that I'm in the sales and marketing industry, now that I want to work with influencers, business owners, etc., etc. That is what I credit to my success, removing optionality from the equation. So guys, I've made this video for documentation because at some point in my life, I'm going to be old, I'm going to have saggy skin, I'm going to have gray hair, and this is all I'm going to have, right? But it's not just for documentation. I want to be able to help anybody who's able to resonate with this story, anybody who feels lost in their life, who feels like a failure. You can turn your life around. And this mindset, this mind shift of removing options from the equation was what flipped the script for me. So I hope you guys take away something from this video, and you guys are going to be hearing a lot more from me, because I am refusing to not post content. I'm going to continue posting content. I'm going to keep on growing. I'm going to keep on becoming better. So guys, get used to it. I'm here, and I'm here to stay. Hopefully you guys took some value from the video. I'll see you in the next one.